Hello and welcome back, goats, to the BigBluePurple channel. Fighting games are a particularly interesting genre of games to me, a genre that I would consider myself quite passionate about. They demand so much from the player and have such a niche yet loyal community. The pressure is all on you, the player, in fighting games. You are deserving of your wins just as much as you are to blame for your losses. There's no RNG or randomness in fighting games, simply two players and the desire for victory. So what is it about this genre that makes it so unique? What are Flow and Fiero? And why do fighting games do a great job at producing them? In this video, I'd like to talk about the psychological concepts of Flow and Fiero. And I'd like to explain why these concepts make fighting games so rewarding to play. Now, before we start this video, I wanted to say that only about 2.8% of you are subscribed to the BigBluePurple channel. Thank you for your continuous support. Now, we all know that feeling, when you're playing a game and your attention is solely focused on that one game. Nothing is distracting you, nothing can distract you. You're in the zone. This feeling of being in the zone is actually well documented in the field of psychology, termed as flow state by psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Probably butchered the fuck out of that. Csikszentmihalyi discovered that people are happiest when they're in a state of flow, a state of concentration and complete absorption with the activity at hand. It's a state in which people get so invested that nothing else seems to matter to them. In his own words, Csikszentmihalyi stated that flow is a state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. The experience is so enjoyable that people will continue to do it even at a great cost, simply for the sheer sake of doing it. He identified a number of elements involved in achieving flow. Stuff like clear goals, consistent feedback, balance between challenges and skills, and a low stake for failure. So how do fighting games create a state of flow in the players? Fighting games are a competitive genre. They require an immense amount of focus during gameplay. Not only do you need to consider your own character's moveset and tools, but you also need to consider what your opponent has at their disposal. On top of this, there's a deep level of mind games involved in the fighting game genre, trying to pick out patterns in your opponent's moveset and punish them for predictable behavior, conditioning your opponent into making specific decisions based on the way that you're playing, understanding what pieces of your moveset fit into the elaborate dance between you and your opponent. All of these concepts require an immense amount of player engagement and thought, and a lot of new players don't even consider these things when they initially start playing fighting games. It's unfortunate because it's quite difficult to make a good tutorial that teaches a new player all of these concepts of mind games and whatnot, because it's something you only really learn through playing the game and experiencing it firsthand. I think this is why fighting games create such a niche and specific community. The players who do take the time to understand the mind games and the intricate design of characters can enter a much deeper level of flow than the players who just mash buttons and hope they win. Fighting games demand a specific level of engagement from the player, and if the player doesn't understand how to properly engage with the game, then the flow state can never be entered. The polarizing nature of this design is exactly why one person may hate fighting games, while another person will swear by them as the most rewarding genre out there. As you may recall from earlier, I mentioned that a balance of challenge and skills are necessary to enter the flow state. The ranking and matchmaking systems in fighting games do a pretty good job at making sure you're always playing with people around your level. This ensures that in 90% of the matches you have, you'll need to pay full attention to the game in order to defeat your opponent. Clear goals are also a necessary element in achieving flow, and I think the simplicity of the goals in fighting games can appeal to some players while turning off others. At the end of the day, the only real goal in a fighting game is to win, and nothing more. For those players who are more competitive, the ranking system also allows for more specific goals. I want to be a top 1000 player. I want to reach blank rank in this game. At the same time though, there's not really an incentive structure to keep you playing the game outside of just wanting to get better. For the players who like to grind out specific skins or prestigious items or level up or gain new stats, there's nothing like that in fighting games. The only real growth you can have as a player is getting better at the game. Again, this is why not everyone who buys a fighting game is going to enter a deep state of flow while in a match. Low stakes for failure is another important element of flow, And in fighting games, there's very low stakes for failure. There's nothing to really lose outside of ranked points when you're playing ranked. And for most of the fighting games I've played at least, the ranking system isn't super punishing until you reach kind of the later ranks and the upper echelon ranks. So the important elements to achieve flow are all present in fighting games, but not until you've gotten over that initial hump of getting into the game and getting somewhat decent at it. In most fighting games, special moves are used through motion inputs, so if a new player doesn't understand how motion inputs work or know how to do any of them, then it's going to take them some time to build up the muscle memory to consistently use them in matches. This can make fighting games feel extremely clunky to a new player when they don't understand how to use special moves in their gameplay. They need to first overcome that obstacle of learning motion inputs so they can understand the flow of the game better. The intense focus required to perform well in fighting games evokes a strong sense of flow in the players willing to indulge. But there's more to it than just flow. What about the reward and gratification that fighting games provide through victory? This is where Fiero comes in, the Italian word for pride, and a psychological term first introduced by Jane McGonigal in her book Reality is Broken. McGonigal describes Fiero like this: Fiero is what we feel after we triumph over adversity. You know it when you feel it, and when you see it. That's because we almost all express Fiero in exactly the same way. We throw our arms over our head and yell. Fiero is the other piece to the fighting game puzzle that evokes a sense of reward in us. Fighting games are a 1v1 environment, and as I mentioned earlier, you take full credit for your victories. Contrast this to any kind of team-based game. Any loss can be blamed on your teammates, and consequently, every victory is credited to the whole team. Even if you contributed absolutely nothing to your team's success, you can still reach victory provided that your teammates are skilled enough to pull your weight for you. This is obviously not to say that Fiero cannot be achieved through multiplayer games, because it absolutely can, but the sense of Fiero is divided into the team rather than just the individual. You know, the guy on the top of the leaderboard who did the most is going to feel pretty fucking good about the game, whereas someone who's in the middle and didn't really contribute as much as the top players isn't going to feel quite as good. In fighting games, you get the full burst of Fiero. You bear the fruits of your own labors, and you feel pride in yourself alone. The average fighting game match also asks a lot more of the player than, let's say, the average Call of Duty match. And as a result, you feel far more pride in your victory because it was harder to achieve. There's no randomness to give you or your opponent an unfair advantage. It all comes down to the skills that you have. Nothing quite compares to that visceral rush you can achieve by outsmarting your opponent, feeling as if you've read them like a goddamn book. Predicting a situation before it even happens and landing the optimal punish. Finally landing that combo you spent 3 days labbing on fucking Red Bull, knowing deep in your soul that the effort you put in has finally paid off. And that's the true glory of fighting games right there. You get back what you put in, more so than any other genre I've ever played. It's almost reminiscent of learning an instrument to me. A lot of the methods I use in practicing guitar mirror the strategies I employ to improve at fighting games. The process of learning a new combo is so similar to learning a new song. You gotta break down the combo into different parts and practice each section before you can put it all together. All this work that goes into improving at fighting games makes that burst of Fiero from your victories all the more rewarding. Fiero is the heart of fighting games, and it's a key element that keeps us players coming back for more. Flow and Fiero are two key psychological elements that game designers likely consider a lot while creating gaming experiences. They go hand in hand to create an addictive reward cycle, without cheap psychological manipulation tactics such as loot boxes and arbitrary experience bars. Fighting games appeal to our brain in a very pure and honest way, and unfortunately many players don't overcome the initial hump of getting into a fighting game. There's no goals or rewards outside of victory, and for new players, this may struggle to get them engaged. The journey is the reward in fighting games, and not every gamer is looking for such an involved experience, especially after coming home from like an exhausting shift at work. But for those of us whose primal urge for competition burns bright, fighting games provide a sense of satisfaction like no other. If you're someone who enjoys more challenging video games like Dark Souls and like roguelike games, I think you'll find a similar type of satisfaction from fighting games. The thrill of overcoming another conscious being in a 1v1 is truly exhilarating. I encourage you, if you're watching this video and you don't play fighting games yourself, but go give them another shot. If you found this video interesting or informative, please remember to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. On our way to 1,000 subscribers, getting very close. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.